Hi, I'm sorry for the delay. Um, Here we are again, book club. I'm gonna let everyone get settled for a second and say hello and see where Jenny's at. I'm really very, very excited to talk about Four Treasures of the Sky. This is one of my favorite books that I've read so far since we started book club, and I'm really excited to get into it. Let's see. Here is Jenny. Let's see. And for those of you who are not in Texas, hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I was just about to explain to everyone in case I start sniffling, it's because of our Texas allergies are like in full force right now. So I feel like I have the sniffles and I'm sweating because it's like 100 degrees outside and all the good
I
stuff.
know. All the things are happening to our bodies at this moment in time.
It's like an attack. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
I
you.
am so excited and so grateful for your work. This has truly been such a gift, and such a wonderful wild ride. And I feel like there was so much unexpected history and knowledge that I learned throughout this book. And I just well, I'm just gonna dig in. How did you come up with this story? Because there's so much to it. Like you have the story in itself, and it's kind of like, um, it's almost like pinball, where Dayu, you're like, where is she going, and what is she hitting? Like I have to know how this started, and then I want to dig into each of those plot points and how you got into it.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. I feel so honored to be here. This is my first Instagram live ever. So
Well,
what a
welcome.
way to thank you. But yeah, as far as the inspiration for the story goes, um, I don't think my dad is watching, but so it actually came from my father. He was, traveling through Idaho back in like 2014 for work, and he happened upon this historical marker on the side of the road near a town called Pierce, Idaho. And this historical marker talked about how in 1885, 5 Chinese men were hanged by local white vigilantes for the alleged murder of a local store owner. And my dad, being the ever so curious, typical dad, was like, what were Chinese people doing in Idaho in 1885? Like, to his knowledge, that was just strange and unexpected. So he took that story back to me in Austin and asked if I could kind of work my way backwards from that and figure out what happened, figure out the circumstances around this event. And, when I heard it, it was just another story that my dad told me. He tells me so many things he wants me to figure out all the time. So I didn't really do anything with it until 2019, the last semester of my MFA program. I was taking a novel writing workshop, and this anecdote was kind of the only thing that sparked interest in me and also felt urgent, and something worth pursuing. So that's kind of where the little seed or nugget for the book really began, was from my dad.
That's amazing. Well, and I was shocked that it did take place in Idaho. I actually grew up in Idaho, funny enough, and I was blown away because I thought I knew a lot about the state's history, and there was so much clearly that I didn't know about the Chinese Exclusion Act. There's so much about our history that I feel like is left out, and I feel like that's also why your book is incredibly important, because it shines a light on a place and time in history that we really need to look into, and where a lot of things stem from. And it is so beautifully written, and I love that you get to the heart of the story, to the heart of Dayu, and watch her, where she comes from and where her strengths come from, and how she builds and she grows throughout this adventure. Um, and I'd love to talk a little bit too, just the inception of Dayu. I feel like I read that you got it from maybe a book that your grandmother was reading. Is that right?
Oh, yes. So it kind of came from various different sources. The inspiration for her journey came from a piece of research I found. Back in the 1880s, Chinese girls and women were not allowed to come over by that point. And so I was wondering how were Chinese people just getting over to the States around the period of the Exclusion Act? And one of the ways was they would smuggle girls into buckets of coal or crates of china and ship them across the ocean to end up in brothels in San Francisco. So that was kind of when the character and the journey for Dayu came to be. And I just wanted to kind of follow her throughout all of that. And her name, Dayu, comes from a very real character in a very real Chinese novel called Dream of the Red Chamber. It's one of the four great novels of China. Everyone's read them, everyone loves them, everyone studies them. So this character she's named after is named Lin Dayu. And this character is someone she's a poet. She's very sensitive. She's very intelligent. But she also has a very tragic life because it is plagued with sickness and spoiler alert for that book, but everyone knows it by now, is that that character ends up dying at the end of the book because she's plagued with consumption for her entire life. And she also loses the man she loves. So my character Dai in Four Treasures of the Sky is named after her, and from the beginning, this is something that feels like a burden to her because she wonders, is everything bad in my life that's happened to me because I'm named after this character that also has this very tragic life trajectory. So yeah, that book was kind of given to me by my grandmother because she is absolutely obsessed with Dream of the Red Chamber. So I just heard about it every year. And I guess that's how the character of Dayu kind of came to formation.
Well, that's magical, and it's magical to be able to come full circle with that
Yeah.
character. She's so beautifully written, and I love all of her different forms that she takes. She's Fang and Peony and Jacob Lee, and she embodies all of these new personas to gain her strength and figure out how to get through almost a new I don't know what the word is, but like a new trial, like a new I'm blanking on the word. Apologies. But these new adventures that she has to overcome. Which one of those characters of Dayu did you have the most fun with? Is there a particular one that was like, oh, I see this one is much easier, or this one's hard, or she has to go through this and learn this?
Right. Oh gosh. Every single one of them presented their challenges, but I think I at least had the most fun writing her as Peony, just because I think that was the one portion of the book where she gets to be surrounded by other girls and other women, and just kind of writing that camaraderie and the relationships she has with these other girls and women in the brothel. It sounds kind of weird to say it was fun for me to write that because it is taking place in a brothel, but I just really enjoyed, developing those relationships and having her meet the other characters as Peony.
Yeah, absolutely. I loved how dark. Sorry, my dog just walked in. I love how dark that part of the book was. It was for me, it was very hard to read through those pages, but they were the pages that I inhaled the quickest because I just wanted to know what would happen next, because that was a particularly very scary moment for Dayu and Peony. But to watch her go through that and then watch the camaraderie between the women and how they all sort of came together to survive was really touching to see how they all navigated it and how they all gained their strengths through that as well. And I also really loved how you wove in calligraphy. I know you weave it in throughout your entire book, but in particular with that part of it and talking about the different women and talking about Swallow, um, how did you research that, and how did you, because for me it was such an art form to learn about calligraphy, but then to weave it in the names, and it's something that's very foreign to me, understanding the differences of Chinese characters and with our like rough American language, and it was so beautifully written. I'm just curious how you accomplished that and how the research was done for that.
Thank you. Yeah, so the Chinese calligraphy portion, for those who haven't read the book, it Dai learns from a very young age from a calligraphy master the practice and art of Chinese calligraphy, and kind of goes about her world using principles she's learned from calligraphy to interpret and understand things that are happening, or her relationships with other people, or just, you know, the world around her. Research for it was, the same as the research I did for the entire book. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of scholarly articles. If anyone's in grad school or has been in grad school out there, JSTOR was kind of the seminal database and archive that I used. But yeah, it was just reading through a lot of schools of thought around calligraphy, because there are several, and many of them are tied to various religions or practices. And so in my book, at least, I kind of cherry picked sensibilities from various schools of thought to kind of form the one that runs through this book. But it kind of started as happenstance. In the beginning, I was just thinking, she can't go through all of the horrible things that she encounters in this book alone. She needs to have a principle or something to hold on to accompany her. And at the time, calligraphy was just on my mind. And so I dropped it in there. But as the book progressed, it became, one of the foundational things for her.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows throughout the book because it plays such a feminine and masculine sort of in such a way that I feel like Dayu kind of like uses that, throughout her
Mhm.
sort of adventure. And it was so fun to sort of lean on and learn more about the characters because I knew so little about it. Um, so that was certainly a delight to be able to do. Also, I just want to shout out, this is pretty fantastic. Congratulations. And for those of you watching, please, if you can still go get your New York Times book review. Jenny's on the cover. This is pretty amazing. And
Thank you.
because they call out a couple of things that I loved, which is one, how you put a new spin on the 19th century Western. And I particularly love this quote from the article, which says, "The dearth of pounding hooves and accompanying dust clouds is telling. Zhang has trained her gaze on an area of American history that has gone largely unnoticed in Westerns, even revisionist ones. The Chinese immigrants who built railroads and worked in mines only to be met with racist persecution when they tried to assimilate into American life." And it's so true and so beautiful and insightful, and it's a much needed perspective. Um, and first, I'd love to know what it's like being featured and how you're feeling about all of this, and what you think about it being called a Western, and if you thought of that going into your book.
Oh my goodness. It feels
It's
so amazing and surreal to see that review, and like the artwork on the cover of the New York Times book review. Truly never could have imagined it. So every day, I'm just waking up and thinking, what? That's where I am at. And as far as it being called a Western, yeah, it was very surprising to me. Even though I know this book takes place in the West, it takes place in California, it takes place in Idaho. Very surprising to me to hear it being referred to as a Western, because going into writing this book, I certainly never even considered ever creating something that could be adjacent to a Western. For me, it was always a story about a young girl who's trying to come into her own and facing challenges, and trying to just become a person that she thinks, can be in this world and succeed in this world. So hearing these things about it being a Western, about the new Western genre that's emerging was very surprising. And for a while, I was very resistant to it because my understanding of a Western has always been it's something that, doesn't feel accessible to me. It feels kind of exclusive as well, simply because you don't really see Chinese or Asian Americans portrayed in the traditional concept of a Western. I'm always thinking of like John Wayne and cowboy stories. So at first I was resistant to it, but there are so many beautiful and wonderful novels and stories, not just in book form, that are coming out, that are Westerns or taking place in the West, or rewriting the traditional narrative that we've understood. And so with that, like C. Pam Zhang's book, How Much of These Hills is Gold, with that, I am so happy to be a part of the Western, and I am so excited to see, what happens with this genre and how these stories keep coming to the surface.
Yeah, I think it's so important to keep writing and reading these stories, because I feel like you're saying, like most of the Westerns identify as like the John Wayne characters who come in and save the day, and it's this sort of washing over of history, and not really giving it a full 360 picture, where it's a much greater melting pot than we give credit or look at, and a lot of different cultures and people come together to create the Western. And so I love that you highlight all of, and all of these beautiful characters and how they got here and how they're like trying to reconcile being here and making their mark and fighting for their freedom and independence and their community. It's really, really beautiful, and it's very important, especially right now. So I won't get into politics, but I'm very passionate about it, and I'm very excited that you're putting this important part of history out there. It's very needed.
Thank you.
This is a historical novel about a Chinese immigrant anti-Asian hate in the 19th century America, but there's also been a resurgence of violence against Asian Americans during the pandemic. And I know that I read it and I felt so ignorant, and I'm very hungry now to make sure that I understand a lot more about where we come from as a country and a culture. And that really, your book really ignited that for me, to make sure that I'm going to first put your book in everyone's hands and say, read this, look at like how amazing and rich our history is, but also to keep understanding the full spectrum. What do you hope that people who read your book walk away with?
I would say, for those who aren't familiar with this part of our history, that it is just a stepping stone for them to go out and learn more about it, and learn, not just from this book, but just learn how to reconcile with that, and think about the actions that they can take to become better allies. Because, for example, for me, even when I was writing this book, I was shocked at how much I didn't know. And certainly I didn't know a lot going in, I've mentioned this before, but I didn't even know about the Exclusion Act until the senior year of my undergrad, like the last semester, when I specifically took an Intro to Asian American Studies course. So, and hearing people who have read the book who are messaging me and saying, I had no idea about this history, that's shocking to me, that like I'm not the only one that doesn't know about this. There's so many people who have never heard about this before. So I would say, let this just, if this is your first encounter with this history, let this, truly be just the first portion of your learning, and please go out and learn more. That is kind of all I can hope to offer is a window into a larger realm of wanting to understand.
Absolutely. I again, I was so shocked even living in Idaho. I thought I knew so much about our history, and it is amazing about how much we don't know and it's excluded. And so I think that's why it is important to continue opening those windows and making them into doors and really making sure we understand where we all come from and how we built this country. It really, it certainly opened my eyes. So I'm very appreciative. Um, so now that your book has been out for a month, what have you been hearing from your and what have you? Sorry, I don't have my readers right now. What have you been hearing from your readers about what the book has meant to them?
Oh gosh, I love that question. Thank you for that question. It's it's been different feedback depending on like which community is giving it. But I'll say, as I mentioned earlier, people who have no idea of this history just messaging me and being really like shocked but grateful for a window into, how they can start learning more. That has been really wonderful. But also from the Chinese American and Asian American community, hearing from them certain portions of the book that resonated with them or with their experiences. That has been one of the most rewarding parts of it for me, I think, because that was always why I loved reading and why I loved writing. It was to connect with people and to connect over shared experiences. And so to kind of have that now is truly, truly wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome. Is there a favorite part of the book that you particularly love to write?
Oh, okay. So definitely part two, when she's in San Francisco, but I really loved, and it was actually the hardest part for me to write the entirety of part three, where Dayu has to assume the identity of Jacob Lee and is in a shop in Idaho, um, and has to kind of forge her way through this new environment. That was both my maybe favorite and most difficult part because throughout the entire book she's running, there are things happening to her, she's reacting, but in Idaho she's kind of forced to slow down and really make do with her environment and the people in that environment. And I just kind of almost loved writing the day-to-day life for her, and slight spoiler, but also kind of this this small love story that starts happening in part three. I just had so much fun with that.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. I feel like in part three, you wrote, I think it's in three, um, about how Dayu sees herself about a man, or maybe it's in part two, but she's talking about um, what it means to be a man. And she
Mm.
says that my experiences then told me everything. It was a matter of believing oneself invincible and strong and owed everything. I'm wondering what her definition of a woman would be. Do you know what
Ooh,
how, or what her thoughts are on being a woman?
yeah, that's a great question. What's interesting is I don't think she would have ever even wandered into the realm of wondering what that was, because so much of her experience is in relation to manhood and assuming the identity of a man and like seeing how men treat people who aren't men. I don't even think she would have had the capacity or like the space to be able to take a moment to think about that. But I'm I'm really like, I almost want to sit down and write that portion of the book now that you've asked that.
Please.
Yeah, I mean, it would probably start by her breaking apart the character for woman and start from there. But that's a really great question. I wish I had a better answer for it.
I just loved how she had to quickly, from the get go, embody and survive through a man's body in a sense
Right.
and disguise herself. So it just got me thinking, like, I wonder what she would think about what her viewpoint is as a woman, like from a woman's perspective, and also dressing up as a man in a woman's body, right. What that would mean. So I just love all of the different characters she embodies and the adventure, which brings me to the end, which I won't give it away, but it certainly was so epic and so big and so beautiful. I particularly loved the third part of your book because I felt like it was so like you just didn't know where to turn, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, we're in a good place, things are good, and it was not expected and I loved that. I loved that I got a payoff that I was not prepared for. And so by the end of the book, I was in tears, and my husband looked at me like, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I wanted how you got to that place without giving it away, but what made you decide on that particular ending, if you can sort of elaborate on that, I guess.
Yes, I will try to be as vague as possible, but the ending, you know, was kind of the beginning for me. I always knew that that was going to be the ending, and I was kind of working my way backwards from that. So for me, you know, getting to the ending, it was a catharsis, but it was also, it was always the right thing to do in my mind. Now kind of hearing the reactions from readers, because I know it has been quite polarizing for some folks. It's kind of been fun for me to see everyone's reactions. But in my mind, the ending has always been something that was victorious and almost like to be celebrated. But I know not everyone will feel that way. That's as much as I think I can say without spoiling it.
I feel like she found her freedom. Yes.
Yes.
It was very beautiful and very well done. Are you working on anything now? Because I need some more of your books. I need some more stories. So what are you working
on? Thank you. And
so it out. No.
I am kind of toying around with a second book. I've been working on it while the first book has been going out into the world. So I have, quite a few pages, but the main thing for me right now is to kind of just take a step back and rest a little, because I feel like, I've been going with the first book. I think rest is really an important part of creativity, and the refilling your cup mantra, I think is undervalued. So right now I'm just taking a step back, recollecting myself, letting my creativity fill back up, and the joy that I feel with writing, letting that come to full force again before I really dive into the second book and hopefully make it into something good.
Well, I love that you're saying that you're going to take time to rest, because I feel like everyone always expects, like, what's next? What's next? Okay, you got that out of the way. Okay, now when you're going to out your other. But you are so talented, and your writing is so beautiful. Selfishly, I hope it's sooner.
Thank you.
And what do you love to read? Are there books that you particularly love to read? Is there something that you are reading right now, or something this past year that's really inspired you?
I mean, I kind of love to read everything, nonfiction, fiction, poetry. I'm currently reading this book of poems called Platitude by a poet named Natasha Rao, and it is so beautiful. Every single poem is so rich with nature and the body and earth, and I leave every single poem just kind of gasping for air. So highly recommend Latitude by Natasha Rao. And, I've been recommending this book to a lot of people, but Craft in the Real World by Matthew Salas's, it's especially great for writers or editors or people who are just interested in writing and identity as well. And yeah, I have so many books that I want to plug right now, but I don't want to overwhelm your viewers.
Oh, no, I mean, I love it. I love I love knowing what everyone's reading, and especially writers, because I feel like it's always inspiring. And I love to collect books. It's my favorite thing, so it's always exciting to get a recommendation.
Yeah,
Um,
your bookshelf in the back.
I mean, I love it. It's my favorite. It's it's my biggest vice, but I feel like you can never have enough books. And
No,
I don't
never.
think people understand who aren't writers and what goes into writing it. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and all of the work and research and everything that you've done over the years to get where you are now. And I love to be able to uplift and applaud and just like read such great works.
Thank you.
And for everyone out there, I'm sure you already have a copy, but please go get a copy. If you're in Austin, there's Book People, which is fantastic. Support your local bookstores. Thank you, Texas Book Festival, who brought us together. I'm so excited to meet you in person at some point here in Austin.
Yes.
That would be so fun. And I'm so thankful. And if there's anything else that you want your readers to know, um, the platform is yours.
I mean, just thank you everyone who's read it or is interested in reading it, for supporting the book. I really appreciate it, especially as a debut author. You know, for like this is my first book. It's kind of my baby. So, you know, all the support that you've given me, Jen, I am so grateful for it. I truly could have never imagined such a reception, but your support has truly meant the world. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Your work and your writing is brilliant and beautiful, and I will support you and back. So just tell me what to do, and I got your back.
Oh, thank you.
See where else you're going, because if this is your debut novel, I mean, girl, like, I mean, I am just we're so excited because your writing is just so beautiful and so touching and just heartfelt and poignant and like teaching and enriching and beautiful. So I'm so grateful and grateful for your time, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Well, I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.